The needle hasn't entered your arm yet, but you already know the exact day it will. You have a scheduled date to die. Not a metaphor, not a threat, an official document, signed by a judge, stamped by the state, filed in a folder with your name on it. And what nobody tells you is this: the waiting is worse than the execution. Over the next few years, you'll discover how a human being survives when the system has already decided he's going to die. You'll learn the rules of a world where the currency isn't money, isn't power, isn't reputation. It's time. Every day you wake up still alive is a victory, and you'll fight for every single one of them. If you're into stories about survival, about what happens to the human mind when it's pushed to its absolute limit, subscribe to the channel. Every week you'll live a new life. The first thing they take is your belt, then your shoelaces, your watch, your wallet, your phone. Everything that connects you to the outside world disappears into a clear plastic bag with a number written by hand. That number is you now. It's not a gradual dehumanization. It's immediate. It's surgical. The moment the metal doors close behind you for the first time, something changes. You don't know what yet, but something changes. Death row is nothing like the movies. In the movies it's dark, damp, full of men screaming between the bars. In reality it's quiet, disturbingly quiet. The cells are individual. The isolation is almost total. You spend between 22 and 23 hours a day inside a space of roughly 65 square feet. 65 square feet. That's smaller than most bathroom stalls. Inside that space there's a concrete bed, a thin mattress, a toilet, a small sink, and a window you can't reach. The light never goes off completely. During the day it's white and artificial. At night it dims, but it never disappears. The state needs to see you at all times, needs to know you're still there, still alive to die on the right date. The first few days are the strangest, not because of fear, not because of rage, but because of the silence inside your own head. Out there your mind was in constant motion. In here there's nowhere to run. You're left alone with every thought you always avoided having. On the third day, you meet the man in the cell next to yours. He knocks 3 times on the wall. You don't know whether to respond. You respond. He tells you his name, how many years he's been there, and then he says something you'll carry for the rest of your life. Death row doesn't kill you with the needle. It kills you slowly, long before that. You don't understand what he means yet. You will. The guard appears in the corridor. Time for the yard. 1 hour of sunlight. You step out of the cell, and for the first time you see the others. There are few of them, each one in his designated space. Nobody makes immediate eye contact. There's a grammar in here you haven't learned to read yet, and you need to learn it fast. Because mistakes in this world don't come with second chances. On death row, the currency isn't money. It's time. Not the time you have left to live, the time you manage to turn into something useful. The men who survive emotionally in here aren't necessarily the strongest. They're the ones who learn to make time work for them. You discover this by watching Marcus. Marcus has been on the row for 11 years. 11 years waiting for a date that was set, postponed, reset, and postponed again. He's 43 years old and looks 60, but his eyes are the sharpest you've ever seen anywhere. He reads. Every day. Everything he can get his hands on. You ask him to pass you a book. He sends you a constitutional law textbook. You stare at those dense pages and think it's a joke. It isn't. Marcus explains with the patience of a man who has time to spare. You're not going to find a lawyer who truly cares about your case. But if you understand your own case better than anyone else, you become useful to the lawyer. And what's useful in here has value. You start reading. The first week you understand almost nothing. The second week you start recognizing the terms. By the end of the first month you've read the same chapter 30 times, and you've finally started to grasp it. Something ignites. Your mind, which had been fading, begins to reorganize itself around a single goal. Not freedom yet. That feels too big to fit inside your head right now. The goal is smaller. Understand 1 page per day. That you can control. And control is everything in here. The public defender handling your case shows up once every 3 months. 30 minutes. He's overworked, exhausted, buried under a stack of other cases he considers more urgent. But at the second visit, you open a notebook where you've written down 3 procedural inconsistencies he hadn't identified. He stops, looks at you differently. Where did you learn this? You point to Marcus's book. He leaves the meeting with the notebook. says he'll look into it. You don't know if he'll come back, but something changed in the way he looked at you. For the first time since you walked into that place, someone saw you as someone who thinks, not just as someone who's going to die. And you don't yet know how much that difference is going to matter. 6 months in, and you already know the rhythm of the row like you've always lived here. 6 a.m., breakfast and the sound of cells opening. 8 o'clock, back to isolation. Noon, lunch. 1 hour in the yard if your behavior is considered appropriate. Dinner at 5. Partial lights out at 10. You've learned to sleep with the light on. You've learned not to respond when the guards provoke you. You've learned that there are invisible hierarchies in here, and that violating one without realizing it can cost you. That's when you make your first mistake. There's a man named Darnell. He's been on the row for 16 years. Nobody speaks to Darnell without him speaking first. Nobody touches anything in Darnell's space without permission. These are unwritten rules that everyone knows except you. In the yard, without thinking, you pick up a ball that rolled to your feet and toss it back without looking at who it belongs to. It belonged to Darnell. He says nothing in that moment. You only realize you've made a mistake when Marcus knocks 4 times on the wall that night. 4 knocks means warning. You ask what happened. He explains in a whisper what you did. Your stomach drops. You spend the night without sleeping, running through what might happen. In here, conflicts don't explode immediately. They ferment. They can simmer for days, weeks. And when they do explode, they explode without warning. But the next day in the yard, you do something that goes against every instinct you have. You walk up to Darnell. You look at him, not at the floor, at him, and you apologize without any hedging. No extra excuses. No attempts to explain. Just an apology delivered in the most direct and honest way you can manage. Darnell stares at you for a stretch of time that feels endless. Then he turns and walks away. Marcus tells you later that was the right move, that Darnell respects people who own their mistakes head-on, that half the problems on that row start with someone trying to dodge instead of face. You survived your first social test, but now you know you're being watched. By Darnell, by the guards, by the others, and someone you haven't identified yet is paying close attention to every move you make. Right now, would you have apologized to Darnell, or stayed quiet and hoped the problem went away? Tell me in the comments. 1 year and 3 months in, the lawyer came back, this time with a different expression on his face. He found something. One of the inconsistencies you flagged opened a line of investigation that led to a real problem in the chain of custody of the evidence. It's not enough to get you out, but it's enough for a solid appeal. He needs you to write a detailed statement about the day of the crime. Everything you remember, in exact sequence, with as much detail as possible. He'll use it to build the argument. You spend 3 weeks writing. You tear it up, rewrite it, tear it up again, not because you're lying, but because the truth is complicated, and you need to learn how to organize it in a way that makes legal sense, not just emotional sense. Marcus helps you. Marcus has read more law books than some attorneys. He knows how the legal language works. The night before you hand in the document, something unexpected happens. Darnell knocks on the wall. For the first time, he initiated contact. He asks what you've been writing. You hesitate. Then you tell him. He goes quiet for a while. Then he says that he tried an appeal once too, that it didn't work, that his lawyer disappeared afterward. There's an enormous sadness inside those words that he doesn't name. You hand in the document the next day. The lawyer takes it, says it'll be months before the court responds. Months. You learn not to count time in months. You learn to count in days. Days are manageable. Months are a weight that crushes you. But 3 weeks later, before any response from the court, something happens that changes everything. A new guard arrives on the row. He's different from the others. Younger, with a look in his eyes that hasn't learned to go blank yet. And in his first week, he makes the mistake that no veteran guard would ever make. He looks you in the eye and asks how you're doing. A simple question that nobody asks in here. And you realize you're going to have to make a decision about that. Because in here, anything that seems too good always comes with a price. And you don't know what this one costs yet. The guard's name is Torres, 26 years old. His first real job. He's not corrupt, not cruel, not anything you expected. He simply hasn't learned yet to switch off his humanity when he clocks in. You decide to test the waters carefully, not by asking for favors, not by creating dependency, just by answering his questions honestly, telling him what the routine is like, what weighs on you, what helps. He listens. Sometimes he asks follow-up questions. You keep enough distance that it doesn't look like you're trying to manipulate him. 2 months later, Torres brings you something, a book that wasn't on the approved list. He got it through screening in a way you'd rather not know. It's a book on Stoic philosophy, with a slip of paper inside that says only, "This helped someone I knew." You read it in 4 days, and something in your mind reorganizes itself in a way that has no rational explanation. The Stoics had a concept for it, the dichotomy of control. What is within your control and what is not? Your execution date is not within your control, but what you do with the hours you have is, you start writing, not the legal statement, something different, a record of everything that happened, of how that place works from the inside, of how people survive or don't survive. 18 months after entering death row, the court's response arrives. The appeal has been accepted for review. It's not a win yet. It's the right to try, but inside that system, the right to try is enormous. Marcus celebrates by knocking 3 times on the wall when you tell him. Darnell says nothing, but in the yard he passes by you and nods once. In here, that's the equivalent of an embrace. The lawyer comes in person, says the odds have improved, that there's a possibility of commutation, that it almost never happens, but that your case has elements that justify the attempt. For the first time since you entered that place, you cry. Not from sadness, from something you had almost forgotten the name of. Hope. And you don't yet know that hope, in here, might be the most dangerous thing of all. Hope has a specific cost on death row. It makes time move differently. When you expect nothing, each day is just a day. Heavy, long, empty, but predictable. When you start expecting something, each day becomes a different kind of torture. You start calculating, imagining, building scenarios that don't exist yet. And when those scenarios take too long to become real, something breaks. Marcus warned you about this. You didn't believe him enough. The court takes 18 months to schedule a hearing. 18 months after the news that felt like the beginning of a turning point. During that time, Torres gets transferred to another wing without any warning. The guard who replaces him is the opposite in every possible way. And Darnell receives a new execution date. His date is 4 months away. You watch something happen to Darnell that has no adequate name. It's not despair. It's not resignation. It's a kind of shrinking, as if the person inside is getting smaller while the body on the outside stays the same. You start spending nights knocking on Darnell's wall, not always with words, sometimes just knocking, so he knows there's someone on the other side. He knocks back. 3 weeks before his date, you write to the clemency board, not for your case, for Darnell's. You take everything you've learned about the law, everything Marcus taught you, everything the philosophy book organized in your mind, and you build the most complete argument you can about why the state should not execute that man. The petition is denied in 7 days. Darnell is executed on a Tuesday morning. You know the exact hour because the row feels different when it happens. The silence changes in quality. It gets heavier. Every man in there feels it, because every man in there knows that one day it will be him. You spend that entire day unable to read a single line. You just stare at the wall on the side where Darnell used to be, and you finally understand what he meant at the beginning. The row doesn't kill you with the needle. You've already lost parts of yourself you'll never get back. If you've made it this far, leave a like. Most people wouldn't survive a single week inside this system. The hearing finally happens. 2.5 years after the appeal was accepted, you walk into a room that feels like another world after so much time seeing only cells and corridors. There's wood on the tables. There's natural light coming through a window. There's a window you can actually see from where you're sitting. You almost can't focus on what the judge is saying because you keep looking at the window. The lawyer gives you a quiet elbow nudge. You come back. The hearing lasts 4 hours. Testimonies, arguments, counter-arguments. You sit and listen to people debate whether you'll live or die as if they're discussing an academic case. It's the strangest experience of your life, stranger than prison itself. At the end, the judge schedules a decision for 60 days out. 60 days. You go back to the cell and tell Marcus. Marcus says something you'll think about every day for the next 60 days whenever your head starts to spiral. You did what was in your control. The rest isn't yours. During those 60 days you write, you read, you maintain the routine with an almost mechanical discipline. Wake up at the same time. Do the exercises that are possible in 65 square feet. Read 2 hours in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. Write at night. On the 58th day you can't sleep. On the 59th you spend the whole night staring at the ceiling. On the 60th day, the lawyer appears in the corridor before his usual time. You know before he even opens his mouth that what comes next is going to change everything, and you realize you no longer know what you want to hear, because you've spent so long learning to live in there that the outside world has become an abstraction. The lawyer sits down in the chair on the other side of the glass, takes a deep breath, and starts talking. The sentence was commuted. It's not freedom. It's maximum security prison for the rest of your natural life. No execution date, no death row, but also no release date. The state decided you'll live, but that you'll live in there. You spend the first few minutes unable to process it. The lawyer keeps talking. Deadlines, transfers, procedures. You hear the words, but they arrive from far away, as if your mind needs time to reorganize reality around this new fact. You're not going to die on the scheduled date. You're going to die in there in a different way. The transfer happens 3 weeks later. It's a bureaucratic process, cold, without ceremony. You say goodbye to Marcus through the wall. 3 slow knocks. He knocks back 4 times. The warning code. But this time you understand he's saying something else. Stay alert. Always. The new place is bigger. Larger yard. More movement. More people. More noise. After years of near total isolation, the sound of other people feels deafening. But there's natural light. Real natural light. Without fogged glass in between. You stand in the yard on your first day, feeling the sun on your face for more than 5 uninterrupted minutes for the first time in years. Someone walks by and tells you to move. You move, but you take a second longer than you should because you can't bring yourself to step out of the sun just yet. That night you write. You write about Darnell, about Marcus, about Torres and the philosophy book, about the hearing and the window with real light, about what death row takes from a person, and what, surprisingly, it gives back. Because death row taught you something that no free place could ever teach the same way. You learned exactly how long a human mind needs to adapt to anything. And you learned the price of that. The adaptation that saves your life is the same one that traps you inside a version of yourself that didn't exist before. You walked in as one person. You came out as another. And the first one no longer exists to welcome the second one back. You're alive. But the person who walked through those metal doors on that very first day, they didn't make it out. They stayed in there. Forever. At what point do you think you would have crossed the point of no return? When does adaptation stop being survival and become the only identity you know? Tell me in the comments. If this story held you from beginning to end, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to live another life inside one of the most dangerous worlds that exists, click on the video appearing on your screen right now. The next story is even more intense.